So on this job, I had a customer contacting me wanting me to install some rope lights in their kid's room. And what I found out about this task was how much time was spent on the front end doing the planning. So the first thing that had to happen was I had to come up with a game plan with regard to how these rope lights were going to be plugged in and also able to be turned on and off easily. And so my first step was to look for the closest outlet, which I found. And then I had to start measuring to see how long of extension cords that I would need, what kind of adapters I might need. And so what this meant was I ended up needing roughly about a 10-foot extension cord. Also, I needed an adapter that had a flat plug that would come downwards, and I was able to then angle that in, connect that to the extension cord. I also needed to get an outlet switch, and so that was a solution to being able to turn these rope lights on and off. Next, I needed to get these extension cords and the flat plug adapter and all of that connected and mounted to the wall in a way that was going to look as good as possible. So I also purchased some cord covers that have an adhesive on the back, and that can stick to the wall. I just put that down as close as I could to the baseboard. And then there were also points where I needed to be able to screw the cord into the wall because the rope lights actually had these little electrical devices that were sticking out of the cord, kind of a bigger type of plastic device that was a part of the cord. So on either side of those areas, I needed to be able to screw that cord into the wall. So I used some clips. You typically use them when you're installing coaxial cable or maybe some kind of direct TV dish cable. And so I got some that were clear because those were going to look the best for the situation. But to get those to actually then screw into the sheetrock, I needed to get some wall anchors. And so I got some wall anchors, put those in, and was able to then screw those coaxial cable connectors onto the cord and then into the wall and keep everything connected that way. And so that in and of itself was almost like its own job all by itself, just setting that up, figuring that out, getting it measured, looking up the extension cords to see what the different lengths, that they're sold in, to see what the options could be. And then obviously planning where that rope light was going to then plug in and begin on the wall. And so that part of it is an example that the customer really isn't even thinking about as part of the job. However, it's actually the most time consuming. In this case, more time was spent on that than actually installing the rope lights once you get it up there. Now, once it came time to get to that part of actually installing the rope lights, something that's very common that happens with all kinds of products that we buy is the manufacturer will include some kind of part or piece that is completely useless. And they just kind of don't care because it would be too much work for them to find a solution that actually would work, so they just throw in whatever and say, here you go. Well, that was the case with this product in that the clips that were included were just completely useless. They were these very thin plastic clips that were way too thin for what was needed. They looked like they would break very easily. And then the type of screw that they came with was very small. It had a very small thread. This was not the type of screw that was going to go into sheetrock. And even if the plan was, okay, well, it needs to go into wood, it wasn't even long enough to get into the wood behind the sheetrock. So fortunately, I checked that out. And that is something that I have gotten so used to doing, from the customer's perspective. They just have received the item and they think everything's just going to be fine. And so they're like, oh yeah, I bought it. Everything's here. Everything's ready to go. But I have learned you have to check on these things. You have to check on, well, what was included? What actually came in the box? And let me look at that to see if this is actually something that will even work. Because I've gotten so used to so many products, including parts and pieces, that just completely don't work. And so fortunately, I had checked that out. I was able to see these parts and pieces. So this was another part of this task where I then needed to go find a solution for how are we going to successfully get these rope lights mounted up to the wall in a way that they're going to stay there, right? So I had to go onto the Amazon journey and look at all different kinds of products. And I found these clips by a company called Govee, Govee. So the bottom line was these Govee mounts were going to work. And so those eventually came in just a couple of days. And then I was able to go over there and start putting those up. And so I spaced those apart about 30 inches, and I checked with the customer to confirm that she was okay with how that looked, because there can be a little bit of sag that'll happen in the rope light depending upon how far apart you go. And so I just went with 30 inches, checked with her to see if she was happy with that. She said she was fine with that. And the first step was to just go through and get those Govee mounts put up all along the wall, which takes a little bit more than you would think, because you're dealing with furniture, you're dealing with moving a bed out of the way, and you're working around dressers and everything that's in that room. And so I went through that process and got those up, and I used both the adhesive and I put a screw in that was able to get into the wood behind the wall. And then it was ready for the rope lights. So I just tested those out, made sure they were working before I put them all up there. And this was just a matter of pushing the rope light into that mount, and it just fits in there and kind of clips in there, and the mount kind of squeezes it and keeps it in place. And so then it was just a matter of going back around and pushing that rope light in all the way around and trying to keep it tight so that there was as little as sag as possible. And once I got back around to the beginning point, I had to overlap just about 4 feet, and I added some mounts in to be able to finish it out there. The end result did look pretty cool in the room. It was a blue shade of light, and the kid that this room was for was into basketball, and it was something I think connected to one of his favorite teams. And there was sports stuff everywhere. So it really did have a very cool effect and a very cool look to it. And the fact that it had that on and off outlet switch made it real easy to turn it on and off, and it ended up turning out great. So this was a great example of something that you would never believe that the preparation to actually get the lights installed would actually take more time than actually installing the lights themselves. But that is many times how a lot of these jobs go. But it was because of all of that prepping in the beginning that allowed it to really look as good as possible within reason, right? Because then, of course, you can go to the extreme of installing an outlet maybe up in the ceiling and take it to a whole nother level. But in this case, it was all about making it look as good as possible within reason and within a certain budget. So the customer was really happy with it. And this is someone I had done a lot of different jobs for. So the next time I had gone over there and done the next job, she had let me know that her kid was using it all the time and really liked it. So even though there were a few unexpected learning curves along the way, ultimately it was really cool to get paid really well to do something creative while also still having plenty of free time to work on my own personal interests as an artist. I show creatives how to get paid to do jobs just like this so they can become their own funding source and have the money and free time they need to pursue their artistic interests. I break it all down at cashcowartist.com. The link is in the description.